My name is Kevin. What I'm about to share might not sit well with some people. Some will laugh, others might get angry, or even dismiss it as imagination. But for those who will stay with me until the very end, I believe your life may never be the same again. I died. But that's not where my story begins. It started 3 months earlier on an ordinary evening when I heard a voice I should have listened to but didn't. It happened while I was washing dishes after dinner. The warm water ran over my hands, and the smell of soap mixed with the faint aroma of the meal we had just shared. Vanessa, my wife, was in the living room, watching the evening news, the TV screen flickering against the walls. Everything felt perfectly normal, until it happened. The sound came soft as a mother's lullaby, yet clear enough to cut through every other noise around me. Kevin. That was all. Just my name. I froze, my mind searching for the source. I turned my head slightly, half expecting to see someone standing beside me, but Vanessa was still on the couch, absorbed in the broadcast. The TV was loud enough that she would have had to shout to get my attention. Drying my hands, I stepped into the living room. "Did you call me, honey?" I asked. She glanced up at me, puzzled. "No." "Why?" I forced a little laugh and shook my head. "Never mind. I must be hearing things." But the next day it happened again, and the day after that, always when I was alone, always just my name, spoken in that same calm, steady tone that somehow lingered in my mind even after it faded. I began to wonder if I was imagining it. Maybe it was the stress from work creeping into my mind. The bills kept piling up, the kids needed new school shoes, my calendar was stuffed with meetings, and I felt like I was running in circles. I convinced myself it was nothing, and decided to ignore it. Looking back now, I wish I hadn't. I wish I had stopped right then, dropped everything and said, "Yes, Lord, I'm listening." But I didn't know then what I know now. August came like any other month. I brewed my coffee, kissed Vanessa goodbye, and drove to work with the radio on, the morning sun washing over the windshield. The hours passed quickly, swallowed by endless calls and paperwork. Then around 11:30, I felt that strange crushing sensation in my chest, like an invisible weight pressing down, stealing my breath. I was in the break room pouring another cup of coffee, when the pain hit like a truck slamming into me from nowhere. The mug slipped from my fingers, shattering into pieces across the tile floor. My left arm went numb, my vision blurred. I tried to call out, but my voice failed me. The edges of the room darkened, and then nothing. Later they told me I had suffered what doctors call a massive heart attack. My heart had stopped for 7 minutes, 7 long minutes when I wasn't breathing, when my body lay still and unresponsive, while my co-workers pounded my chest and prayed the ambulance would arrive in time. But I wasn't gone. Not really. Somehow I was more alive than I had ever been. Before I go on, I'd love to know where you're listening from. It would be wonderful to feel connected, even if distance separates us. And if you can, please like this video. It helps others discover testimonies like mine. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Let's have an honest conversation. And don't forget to subscribe for more. The first thing I noticed was the peace. Imagine the calmest, safest moment of your life. Now multiply it by 1,000. That's what it felt like when I left my body. I could see the scene from above. My body on the break room floor. My friend Mike leaning over me, pumping my chest desperately. Tears streaming down his face. I wanted to tell him I was okay, that there was no need to cry, but I couldn't speak. Then came the light. It wasn't like the sun or any lamp I'd ever seen. This light was alive. It wrapped around me like a warm embrace, full of love, full of welcome. It didn't pull me with force. It invited me, the way a parent opens their arms to a child who has been gone too long. Fear didn't exist there. Instead, I felt anticipation, like I was about to step into a place I had always belonged but had never seen. I moved through what I can only describe as a tunnel, though that word hardly captures it. The walls seemed alive, shimmering with colors that don't exist in our world. Around me was sound, music, but more than music, it was joy itself, turned into song. Time felt different there. I could see and feel moments from my past, my present, and even the future all at once, flashes of my childhood, the day I married Vanessa, moments yet to come. Everything was connected, woven together in ways I could suddenly understand. And then, I arrived. The place was more real than reality itself. The colors were richer. The very air seemed to hum with life. And there he stood, a man I somehow knew even though I had never met him. His presence filled the space. His skin glowed bronze, as though kissed by eternal sunlight. His hair was white as fresh snow, yet he carried the strength of youth and the depth of eternity in his face. His eyes, they burned like fire, yet that fire was gentle like a campfire that warms you on a cold night. "Kevin," he said, and I knew instantly it was the same voice that had called me for 3 months. Without thinking, I dropped to my knees. My soul knew who he was before my mind could even process it. "Jesus," I whispered. He smiled, and in that smile was light enough to drive away every shadow in the universe. "Yes, my son," he said softly. "We need to talk." He led me into what I can only describe as a garden, but no garden on earth could compare to this one. The flowers seemed to sing as we passed, not with words, but with life itself. The trees swayed in a breeze that felt like liquid love. Every step I took on the golden grass sent ripples of light outward. We stopped beside a stream that flowed uphill, clear as glass, yet endless in depth. Jesus picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the surface. Each skip sent out waves of sound that blended with the flowers' song in perfect harmony. "This," he said quietly, "is what earth was meant to be, and this is what it will be again when I make all things new." I had 1,000 questions, yet somehow, just being near him answered most of them. For the first time in my life, I felt absolutely safe. Then his expression shifted, still gentle, but now serious. He stood and said, "Come, there's something I must show you." We walked toward a building that seemed to be carved from a single giant pearl. As we drew near, I began to hear sounds from inside, crying but not from sadness. It was the kind of weeping that comes from love so deep it aches. Inside the building, I saw something that broke my heart. Angels were weeping. These were not delicate or fragile beings, but towering, majestic figures, their presence radiating power and holiness. Their wings, broad and strong like those of mighty eagles, stretched high above them, shimmering with hues that seemed alive. Yet here they were, bowed low on their knees, their heads bent, tears flowing like rivers that glistened as they fell to the gleaming floor beneath. Each drop seemed to carry the weight of human sorrow. In the very center of this immense chamber stood something that looked like a window, but it was no ordinary opening. It stretched floor to ceiling, wider than a city gate, and instead of showing what was in front of us, it revealed living scenes from Earth as if they were unfolding right here. I watched children curl up on worn mats, pulling thin blankets over their frail bodies as they went to bed with empty stomachs. I saw wars rip families apart, fathers clutching their lifeless sons, mothers screaming and falling to the ground in despair. I saw people attacking one another with cruel words, with gestures full of bitterness. I saw churches where arguments had replaced grace, where pride stood taller than compassion. Even creation itself groaned. Rivers choked with filth, forests stripped bare, the air heavy with neglect. "This," Jesus said, his voice low and trembling, "is the hall of tears." His own eyes glistened as he looked at me. Every act of cruelty, every cry of pain, every injustice that takes place on earth, heaven feels it here. We weep because our love runs deep, and we weep because the time left is not much. He took my hand and led me away from the hall of tears into a chamber of deep stillness. This room seemed to hum with significance. The walls rose high and were covered entirely with scrolls, each glowing with a soft inner light, as though they held living words inside them. The air carried a faint, sweet fragrance, like a library kept in the presence of God for eternity. Jesus walked with steady steps to one scroll in particular and drew it down from its place. As he held it before me, I saw my own name shining on it, letters formed not with ink, but with light itself. "This is your scroll, Kevin," he said gently, unrolling it as though it were a treasure beyond price. "Every person has one. Each scroll contains the story of their purpose, their calling, and their destiny." As it opened, the scroll came alive. Images and words rose from it like visions, weaving my past and my future together. I saw myself as a boy, asking my grandmother about God, watching her weathered hands turning the thin pages of her Bible. I saw my wedding day, the joy in Vanessa's smile as we held hands. I saw moments of joy so vivid I could almost feel them again, and moments of pain I had long buried, and then an image that made my breath catch. I was standing before crowds, telling them about this very conversation. I saw myself writing books, speaking to gatherings, warning people about what was coming. Some listened intently and changed their lives. Others turned away, their faces closed in anger. "This," Jesus said firmly, "is why you are here. This is why I have been calling your name. You are going back, Kevin, and you are going to tell the world what you have seen and heard." Before I could speak, he led me into another room. This one was unlike the others. Every wall was covered in mirrors, but they didn't reflect me. Each one showed a living image of a different nation. I saw America, its people divided, voices shouting in the streets. I saw villages in Africa, where children ran barefoot through dusty roads, their faces glowing with joy, despite having nothing. I saw war-torn places reduced to piles of rubble, the silence between explosions just as heavy as the blasts. Every nation, Jesus said, his voice carrying both gravity and tenderness, is standing at a crossroads. The choices made in the years ahead will shape generations. Some will step into the light, others will sink deeper into darkness, but there is no longer time for indecision. He motioned toward one mirror that showed my own hometown. I could see my street, my house, neighbors going about their daily routines, completely unaware that in the courts of heaven decisions were being made that would affect the course of their lives forever. "The trumpets are about to sound," he said quietly. "4 warnings to awaken a world that is sleeping. After that, everything changes." He showed me a calendar, but not one I had ever seen before. There were no months, no numbers, only events and seasons, each glowing with divine significance. It was like God's personal schedule, every entry marking a turning point in history. "August is when it begins," he said, pointing to one section that glowed more brightly than the rest. "Between August and December, 4 trumpets will sound. Each will be louder than the one before. Each will be a wake-up call for those willing to listen." I saw golden circles marking world-shaking events, disasters, political upheavals, spiritual awakenings. Some would dismiss them as random chance. Others, whose hearts were open, would recognize them as love calls from heaven. The first trumpet unfolded before me in detail. I saw archaeologists in Jerusalem working in a site they had dug many times before. This time their tools struck something extraordinary. An ancient scroll wrapped in cloth that glowed even underground. It contained a message that erased centuries of doubt about God's love for every nation. Written in multiple languages, it revealed that his heart had never been for one people alone. News of it would sweep across the globe, but immediately, voices would rise to discredit it. Experts on television and online would call it a hoax, inventing elaborate theories to deny the truth. World leaders would meet behind closed doors, some trying to bury it, others trying to use it for their own agendas. Very few would simply listen to what God was saying. Churches would divide, some embracing the call to love without boundaries, others rejecting it because it disturbed their traditions. And yet the message would spread like a wildfire no one could contain. Young people, in particular, would take it into public squares, reading its words aloud and praying over their cities. The second trumpet was harder to bear. I saw churches silencing voices that spoke truth. Pastors who called for caring for the poor and loving the outsider were pushed out. Congregations shrank around leaders who demanded change instead of comfort. But from this pruning came beauty. These silenced voices began gathering in coffee shops, in living rooms, in community halls. The Spirit of God moved among them. They were small groups, but the presence of God burned brightly there. In some churches, I saw literal flames resting on the altar, flames that didn't consume the wood. Scientists would have no explanation. Skeptics would call it mass delusion, but those who saw it knew they were standing on holy ground. The flames spread only where hearts were pure. Churches consumed by pride or greed remained cold. A new wave of young believers rose up. They sang in languages they had never learned, painted visions that spoke to strangers, danced in the streets with joy. Critics called it chaos. Heaven called it worship. And their gatherings were marked by compassion more than performance. They chose feeding the hungry over building bigger walls, sheltering the homeless over hosting banquets. Their worship would be measured not by how loud they sang, but by how much they loved. The third trumpet would be announced by something extraordinary in the sky. A new star would appear, brighter than Venus and impossible to miss, even in the middle of the day. Astronomers all over the world would scramble to study it, yet their data would defy established science. It would shine from a place where, according to every known law of astronomy, no star should exist. The star would pulse in shifting colors, gold, silver, and at times a shade of blue so breathtakingly beautiful that those who looked at it would weep without knowing why. Somehow, people across every time zone would see it directly overhead, as though it were fixed in place for them alone. Scientists would turn their most advanced telescopes toward it, but the readings would contradict everything they thought they knew about the universe. Some would openly admit they had no explanation. Others would work tirelessly to invent theories, anything to avoid acknowledging the obvious: they were witnessing a miracle. While experts debated, ordinary people would start reporting extraordinary experiences. They would have dreams unlike anything they had experienced before. They would hear quiet whispers of love and reassurance in moments when they felt most hopeless. Children, in particular, would become unusually sensitive to spiritual realities. Jesus showed me classrooms where young students spoke about angels as easily as they spoke about their friends. Teachers would be left speechless when children described glowing lights around certain people or knew details about their classmates' lives that no one had told them. Parents would be astonished to hear their children praying for neighbors by name, even though they had never discussed those neighbors' struggles at home. The children would talk about heaven as though it were just another familiar place, because to them it would be. The fourth trumpet would bring even greater change. In the poorest corners of the world, supernatural provision would appear without warning. Families with bare cupboards would find their tables full of food they hadn't purchased. In deserts where no water had ever been found, clear, fresh wells would spring up from the ground. But these miracles would come with a choice. Those who chose to share freely would see the supply continue without end. Those who hoarded or tried to sell what they had been given would watch it vanish like fog in the morning sun. Meanwhile, in the entertainment capitals of the world, a different kind of spiritual battle would unfold. Actors, musicians, directors, people who shaped culture would begin encountering God in unexpected ways, right in the middle of movie sets and recording studios. Some would welcome these encounters, using their voices to point audiences toward the truth. Others would resist fiercely, doubling down on content meant to glorify darkness. The divide would grow so sharp that the entertainment world would split into two entirely separate industries, one inspiring hope and the other deepening despair. The most beautiful part of the fourth trumpet, though, would be the presence of Jesus himself among the people. He would walk through major cities around the globe. Not everyone would see him with their physical eyes, but for those who did, the encounter would mark them forever. Sometimes he would appear as an unassuming man, a homeless traveler on a park bench, a school janitor sweeping a hallway, or even a child standing quietly in a crowd. Those who showed kindness to him in these humble forms would later realize they had welcomed the King of Kings himself. Their simple acts of compassion would return to them multiplied in ways they could never explain. After showing me the fourth trumpet, Jesus revealed what would come next. Governments that had relied on power without justice would begin collapsing. Not through revolutions or wars, but because corruption long hidden would suddenly be dragged into the light. Economic systems built on greed would crumble almost overnight. Banks that had exploited the poor would fail in a single day. Corporations that had destroyed the earth or abused workers would find themselves bankrupt without any clear reason, except that the season of injustice had ended. Yet there would be hope rising in the midst of the collapse. New leaders would step forward, not celebrities or politicians, but ordinary men and women who had been quietly serving their neighbors for years without seeking recognition. These humble servants would fill the vacuum left by fallen powers, building communities rooted in honesty, kindness, and cooperation. Goodness would spread faster than anyone could track. A single act of kindness would ripple outward, inspiring dozens more, until whole neighborhoods were transformed. Videos of strangers helping strangers would be shared millions of times online, sparking movements that united people across cultures and countries. Prayer gatherings would multiply at an astonishing rate, far surpassing the growth of any social media network. People would join together to clean streets, feed the hungry, and care for the elderly. What began as small local gestures would grow into massive citywide movements. Even those who had once denied God's existence would find themselves drawn to these movements, not because of rules or religion, but because of the undeniable love they witnessed. And the ones God used most powerfully would not be the ones anyone expected. Children would speak with prophetic clarity, offering wisdom that silenced adults. Refugees, welcomed into new countries, would carry spiritual gifts that blessed the very nations that took them in. People whose pasts were marked by darkness and failure would shine the brightest, their testimonies sparking countless transformations. Traditional religious leaders would struggle with this unexpected shift. Some would resist the idea that God could speak through those without formal training, but those with humility would remember that God had always chosen the unlikely to confound the wise. The world would slowly split into two kinds of places. In some cities, crime would drop dramatically. Neighbors would take care of one another, and even the air would seem cleaner. Visitors would speak of an unshakable peace they felt simply walking through the streets. Other cities, however, would spiral deeper into chaos, not because God had abandoned them, but because they had refused every offer of grace. These places would feel dangerous and dark, even in full daylight. People would flee to the cities of light, seeking the safety and hope they offered. The contrast would become so stark that no one could deny something supernatural was happening. Finally, every human being would face a decision that could no longer be avoided. The evidence of God's reality would be so overwhelming that no one could claim ignorance. Each person would have to choose light or darkness. Some would choose the light, even if it cost them everything. Others would cling to the darkness, even while seeing clearly where it would lead. In the end, the choice would reveal what had been in their hearts all along. As Jesus finished showing me these visions, I realized our time together was ending. The thought of leaving this perfect place to return to the brokenness of earth filled me with dread. I fell to my knees before him and pleaded, "Please, let me stay. I don't want to return to pain, to struggle, to fear. I want to remain here with you forever." Jesus knelt down, lifting my chin so I had to look into his eyes. They were filled with compassion, yet also an unshakable resolve. "I know, my son. Everyone who comes here wants to stay, but your work isn't finished yet. And if you don't go back and tell them what you've seen, how will they know what's coming?" His words carried both urgency and tenderness, like a command wrapped in compassion. He reached out his hand and pulled me gently to my feet. As I stood, I felt the weight of what he was asking press against my chest. Yet his touch filled me with a strength I knew wasn't mine. We began walking together toward a great radiant light that pulsed like the heart of eternity, the gateway that would return me to earth. "Remember," he said, his voice steady yet filled with warmth, "you are not going back alone. My presence will walk with you in every step, through every shadow, through every storm. And one day, sooner than you think, you will return here not as a visitor but to stay forever." The light grew brighter as we walked, but he slowed his pace, speaking with a tone that demanded my full attention. "This generation," Jesus continued, "stands at the most critical crossroads in all of human history. They have access to more knowledge than any generation before them, yet instead of drawing closer to me, they are drifting further away. They must be shown what lies at the end of both paths. They need someone who has seen for themselves to warn them." He stopped suddenly and turned to face me. The light reflected in his eyes, but there was something even more powerful, an intensity that pierced my soul. "Some will listen to you, Kevin," he said. "Some will feel the weight of truth and respond. Others will mock you. Some will ignore you. And there will be a few whose hearts will harden with anger toward you because of what you speak. But you must not let that break your spirit. Your duty is to plant the seeds with faithfulness, and let me decide how and when the harvest will come." I swallowed hard, nodding though my mind was spinning. The responsibility felt overwhelming. How could I possibly take the infinite beauty and weight of what I had just experienced here and translate it into words small enough for human ears, yet powerful enough to stir human hearts? He must have read the question in my mind, because he answered without my speaking. "Many will not believe, because belief requires them to change, and change terrifies them. They've built entire lives on the foundation that this world is all they have. To accept the truth would mean tearing down what they've built. Then he lifted his hand, and a final vision appeared before my eyes. I saw myself sharing my story. I saw faces in the crowd, some weeping, some frowning in disbelief, others looking away, as though the words were too much to bear. I saw people turning toward God in repentance, falling to their knees in prayer. I saw others taking to the internet to discredit my words, twisting them to fit their own comfort. And I saw those who simply shrugged and carried on as if nothing eternal had been placed before them. "Don't take their reactions as a reflection of you," he said softly. "Your role is to deliver the truth with love and clarity. Whether they receive it or not is between them and me. The separation has already begun. Every single day, people are choosing their side without realizing it. Every act of love moves them toward the light. Every act of selfishness pulls them deeper into darkness. The trumpets will only make visible what has long been hidden." I realized then that the visions weren't just about the events to come. They were about right now, about choices being made in the quiet moments of life, in conversations, in acts of kindness or cruelty. "Tell them," he said with urgency, "that they don't have to wait for the trumpets to choose. They can choose today, right now, to turn toward the light, and if they do, they will be ready for anything that comes." Before I could respond, he began to give me direct, simple instructions, truths that sounded almost too simple, yet I knew they were the foundation of everything. "It's not complicated," he said, smiling in a way that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Love God with all your heart, and love your neighbor as yourself. Every other command, every other act worth doing, flows from that." Then he spoke of practical preparations. "Forgive those who have hurt you, even if they never apologize. Give generously to those who have less. Stop trying to impress people, and start seeking to serve them. Pray not only for yourself, but for your street, your neighborhood, your nation. And most of all," he added, "seek me for who I am, not just through the motions of religion. Those who walk closely with me now will not be shaken when the trumpets sound. In the noise and chaos, they will know my voice, and they will find rest in my presence." The next thing I knew, I was opening my eyes to the sterile white of a hospital room. I had been gone 3 days. The doctors called it miraculous that I had no brain damage, despite being without oxygen for so long after my heart attack. Vanessa was curled up in a chair beside my bed, her face streaked with the dried marks of tears. Even in her exhaustion, I saw the love in her expression. My heart swelled with gratitude as I whispered a silent prayer of thanks to God for letting me return to her. But deep within, I knew this was not simply a return. It was the beginning of a mission. The memories of heaven did not fade like a dream. They grew clearer with every hour. I could feel the weight of his words pressing against my soul. If you are still reading this, it is not by accident. Out of billions of people alive on this earth right now, you are hearing this message. That means something. It means God has chosen this moment to reach you. As I write these words, the first trumpet has not yet sounded. Everything I was shown is coming. But for now, the world is still in the time of preparation. That means there is still room for grace, still time for you to prepare your heart and your life for what lies ahead. Don't wait for a sign to convince you. Don't tell yourself you'll respond when the timing feels perfect. The calendar in heaven is moving forward. Whether you acknowledge it or not, start now. Speak to God with honesty. Tell him you're sorry for the ways you've ignored him or harmed others. Ask him to teach you how to love better. Treat each person you meet as though they were Christ himself, because sometimes they might be. One of the most sobering truths I learned is that every soul has a deadline, not necessarily for death, but for decision. There comes a point when you've heard enough truth, when you've been shown enough love, that the choice can no longer be postponed. I don't know when your deadline will be. Neither do you. It could be years from now, or it could be before this day ends, but it will come. And when it does, you will want to be ready. Readiness is simpler than you think. It doesn't require perfection, years of religious study, or a dramatic encounter like mine. All it requires is a heart willing to say, "God, I believe you love me and I want to love you back. Help me to do it." If you are praying that now, welcome to the family of faith. If you are not yet ready, don't close your heart. Keep your ears open for the whisper of your name. Keep your eyes open for the quiet evidence of God's love in your daily life. The same Jesus who spoke to me in heaven is speaking to you now, through these words, through the kindness of others, through the beauty that catches you off guard, through the longing you feel for something more than this world can give. He is calling your name just as he called mine. The countdown has already begun. The trumpets will sound, and when they do, I pray you will be ready to recognize the voice of love calling you home. Thank you for listening. If this message has blessed you, please like this video so more people will hear it. Share it with those you love. It may be the most valuable gift you could give. And if you have not yet subscribed to our channel, please do so. It's free, and it's a way of joining this great community of believers.